I never thought I would have to record a message like this. I never imagined there would be a moment where I would sit alone, looking at a hospital room door, hearing machines keeping someone I love alive, and realizing that one person could hold so much power over my heart without even knowing it. My mother is lying here because of a pain that started with a conversation about you, a decision connected to you, and a fear that I have been carrying silently for longer than I ever admitted. And before you judge yourself, before you think this is about blame, I need you to understand something. This is not a story about anger. This is a story about love, about fear, and about the terrifying moment when the people we love become connected in ways we never expected. I keep asking myself one question over and over again. How did we arrive here? How did something that began with hope, with dreams, with the possibility of building a future together, become something that made my family feel like they were standing at the edge of losing something precious? Have you ever experienced a moment where your heart knows someone is important, but your mind starts creating thousands of reasons why you should walk away? Have you ever been afraid of loving someone because you knew the deeper you fell, the more painful it would become if you lost them? That is where I have been. Somewhere between wanting to protect everyone and wanting to protect what I feel for you. Somewhere between the responsibility I carry and the emotions I cannot control. People see successful individuals and assume they have answers for everything. They imagine confidence means never being afraid. But the truth is, the hardest decisions in life are never about technology, money, or achievements. The hardest decisions are about people. They are about looking into someone's eyes and wondering whether your heart is making the right choice or leading you toward a future you cannot survive. When I saw my mother in that hospital bed, I felt something inside me break. Not because she was weak, but because for the first time I saw the cost of keeping emotions hidden for too long. I saw a woman who spent her entire life protecting me, sacrificing for me, believing in me, and suddenly I was the one who had to stand there and admit that maybe I had underestimated how deeply my choices affected the people around me. I wanted to be strong. I wanted to tell everyone that everything would be fine. But when the room became quiet and nobody was watching, I realized I was scared. I was scared of losing my mother. I was scared of losing you. And the most painful part was realizing that I didn't know which loss would hurt more, because both of you represented different parts of my heart. My mother represents where I came from. You represent the possibility of where I could go. How do you choose between your past and your future? How do you explain to someone that they are not a mistake, but the circumstances around them have created a storm that nobody knows how to stop? There is something I have been trying to tell you, but every time I get close, I hesitate. Because some truths are not difficult because they are complicated. They are difficult because once they are spoken, everything changes. And I have been afraid that if I tell you everything I feel, you will see yourself as a burden, instead of seeing yourself as someone I love. I have been afraid that you will carry guilt for something your heart never intended to cause. But tell me something. Have you ever noticed how the people who care the most are sometimes the ones who blame themselves the fastest? Have you ever felt responsible for a pain that was never truly yours to carry? Because I need you to understand that love is not always about finding someone who creates a perfect life. Sometimes love is about finding someone who is willing to stand beside you when life becomes imperfect. I remember the moments when I imagined a future with you. Not the glamorous moments people usually talk about. Not the celebrations or the achievements or the perfect pictures. I imagined the quiet moments, sitting together after a difficult day, looking at each other without needing words, knowing that no matter how complicated life becomes, there is one person who understands the battles you never speak about. And maybe that is why this hurts so much. Because you were never just an idea to me. You were never just someone I hoped to meet someday. You became a person connected to my deepest fears and my greatest hopes. The thought of losing you does not feel like losing a relationship. It feels like losing a part of a future I had already started building inside my mind. But I need you to know there was a moment when I almost gave up. A moment when I looked at everything happening around me and thought maybe walking away would be easier. Maybe protecting everyone meant removing myself from the situation. Maybe loving someone sometimes means leaving before you cause more pain. And that thought destroyed me because deep inside I knew something. Running away is sometimes easier than fighting for something meaningful. Avoiding pain is easier than facing the truth. But easy decisions are not always the right decisions. And the hardest thing I have learned is that love requires courage long before it requires happiness. Before I tell you the rest of what happened, before I explain the conversation that changed everything between my mother and me, I want you to know something important. I am not speaking to you. because I want you to feel guilty. I am speaking because I spent too long protecting everyone else's emotions while hiding my own. And maybe you are watching this somewhere right now, wondering if this message is meant for you. Wondering if someone out there has ever felt the same fear of losing something they cannot replace. If my words are reaching your heart, I want you to stay with me through this journey. And if you feel connected to this story, you can subscribe so we can share more honest moments like this together. And tell me, where are you watching from right now? And have you ever loved someone so deeply that the fear of losing them became heavier than the fear of being hurt? There is still something I haven't told you. Something I kept hidden because I was afraid you would misunderstand my silence. I haven't told you the real reason yet, because the truth is not only about what happened to my mother. It is about a decision I made when I thought I was protecting everyone. But I was actually hiding from the one conversation I needed to have with you, and that conversation changed everything. I spent so much time believing that silence was a form of protection. I thought if I carried the weight alone, if I absorbed every difficult emotion before it reached you, then maybe I could keep you safe from the chaos surrounding us. But I learned something painful. Silence does not always protect the person you love. Sometimes silence creates a distance that becomes more painful than the truth itself. When I sat beside my mother's hospital bed, I kept replaying every moment that brought us here. Every conversation, every hesitation, every decision I made while convincing myself that I was being logical. But love has a strange way of exposing the parts of ourselves we try hardest to hide. It showed me that beneath every calculated decision, beneath every achievement and every appearance of confidence, there was still a person who was afraid, a person who did not want to lose his mother, a person who did not want to lose you, and a person who finally had to admit that he could not control everything. Have you ever had a moment where life forced you to choose between what makes sense and what your heart refuses to abandon? Have you ever stood at a crossroads where both paths carried pain, and no matter which direction you chose, someone you loved could get hurt? That was my reality. Everyone around me saw the situation from the outside. They saw events, they saw decisions, they saw consequences, but nobody saw the invisible battle happening inside me every single night. Nobody saw me sitting alone, wondering if I had made the biggest mistake of my life. Nobody saw me questioning whether my desire to build a future with you had created a storm that my family was not prepared to face. And the hardest question kept returning. What if loving you was the right feeling at the wrong time? Because sometimes the most painful situations are not created because love is wrong. Sometimes they happen because two people who are meant to find each other encounter circumstances that test whether their connection is strong enough to survive. I wanted to tell you everything immediately. I wanted to pick up the phone and say, you need to know what is happening. You need to know what I am feeling. You need to know that I am scared. But every time I tried, I stopped because I remembered your face the last time we talked. I remembered the uncertainty in your eyes. I remembered how quickly you blamed yourself whenever something went wrong, and I could not bring myself to place another weight on your shoulders. But hiding the truth created another kind of pain, because while I was trying to protect you from feeling responsible, I was also taking away your chance to stand beside me. I was making a decision for both of us without asking what you wanted, and maybe that was my greatest mistake. Maybe love is not about saving someone from every difficult moment. Maybe love is about trusting someone enough to let them see the difficult moments with you. I have spent my entire life building things that could survive pressure, systems, companies, ideas, technologies, things that could be tested, improved, and repaired. But people are different. A heart cannot be debugged. A relationship cannot be calculated. A person you love cannot be treated like a problem you solve. And that realization scared me more than anything, because I knew if I truly let you into my life, I would have to accept something I always struggled with, vulnerability. I would have to admit that there are things I cannot fix. There are moments where I cannot protect everyone. There are emotions that cannot be controlled. And you were the person who made me understand that. You showed me that strength is not always standing alone. Sometimes strength is looking at someone and saying, I need you. But before I could say that, everything became more complicated. My mother woke up one night and asked me a question I was not prepared for. She looked at me with the same eyes that watched me grow up, and she asked why I was trying so hard to carry everything by myself. I did not have an answer, because the truth was, I was afraid. I was afraid that if I admitted how much you mattered to me, people would think I was choosing you over my family. I was afraid that if I defended my feelings, someone would misunderstand my intentions. I was afraid that the people I loved most would end up on opposite sides of my heart. And there is no pain like feeling trapped between two people who mean everything to you. That night changed something inside me, because my mother said something I will never forget. She told me that love should never be built on fear. She told me that if someone truly cares about me, they deserve honesty, not protection disguised as silence. And those words stayed with me, because I realized I had been making you carry a story you did not even know existed. You were living your life while I was fighting a battle in my mind. You were wondering why I seemed distant, while I was drowning in questions I never shared. And maybe you wondered if I cared less. Maybe you wondered if I was slowly walking away. But the truth was the opposite. I was holding on so tightly that I forgot how to breathe. There was a moment when I thought I had already lost you. A moment when I saw that you had stopped asking questions. You stopped trying to understand my silence. You stopped reaching out the way you used to. And that moment felt like watching a door slowly close while standing on the other side. Have you ever lost someone before they actually left? Have you ever felt the distance growing between two hearts and realized that your fear of losing them might be the very thing pushing them away? That was my greatest fear. Not that you would leave because you stopped caring, but that you would leave because you believed I stopped caring, and I could not let that happen, because there was a truth I had been avoiding. A truth that was bigger than the hospital room, bigger than the fear, bigger than every argument and every misunderstanding. The reason my mother was hurt was not because of you. The reason we were all suffering was because I had been carrying an impossible choice alone, instead of allowing the people I loved to face it with me. And there is a difference between being responsible and taking responsibility for things that were never yours. You were never the enemy in my story. You were the person I was afraid to lose. But there is still one thing you do not know. One decision I made when I believed everything was falling apart. A decision that could have changed our entire future. I never told you what happened the night I left the hospital. I never told you who I called. And I never told you the promise I made when I thought I might never see you again, because that promise revealed the part of my heart I had spent years trying to hide. That night outside the hospital was the moment everything inside me finally collapsed. I had spent so many days pretending I was stronger than I felt, pretending I could carry every responsibility without letting anyone see the cracks forming inside me. But there is a point where even the strongest walls begin to fall, and that night I reached that point. I remember sitting alone in my car, looking at the hospital lights through the window, knowing that my mother was inside and knowing that the woman I loved was somewhere far away, unaware of the storm happening around me. And for the first time in my life, I stopped trying to find the perfect answer. I stopped trying to calculate the perfect decision. I stopped trying to control an outcome that was never completely mine to control. I just admitted the truth. I was afraid. Not the kind of fear people talk about when they are facing a challenge or chasing a dream. This was a deeper fear. The fear of losing the people who gave my life meaning. The fear of waking up one day and realizing that I had protected myself from pain so carefully that I had also protected myself from love. And that realization broke something open inside me. Because I finally understood that the greatest risk in life is not loving someone and getting hurt. The greatest risk is never allowing yourself to love deeply enough to be changed by another person. You changed me, not because you tried to, not because you demanded anything from me, but because you made me see the parts of myself I had ignored for years. You made me see that behind every achievement, behind every success, behind every decision that people praised, there was still someone who wanted something simple. Someone who wanted to be understood. Someone who wanted to come home and know there was a person waiting who cared about the person underneath everything else. And that person was you. I finally picked up my phone that night. My hands were shaking because I knew one conversation could decide everything. I knew that after I told you the truth, there would be no more hiding behind explanations. No more pretending everything was fine. No more distance created by fear. You would either understand my heart, or you would walk away from it, and that possibility terrified me. Have you ever had a moment where you wanted to say everything, but you were afraid that honesty would cost you the person you were being honest with? Have you ever stood in front of someone emotionally and realized that the truth you are about to share could either bring you closer or change everything forever? That was where I was. And then I realized something. If our connection could only survive when everything was easy, then maybe it was never as strong as I believed. But if our hearts could survive a difficult truth, then maybe what we had was something rare, something real. So I told you what I should have told you from the beginning. I told you that my mother being in the hospital was never about blaming you. I told you that the pain came from my inability to communicate, from my fear of disappointing people, from my habit of carrying everything alone. I told you that I was sorry, not because I stopped believing in us, but because I allowed fear to create a distance between us. And then I heard your voice, a voice I thought I might never hear again. You were quiet at first, and that silence scared me more than any argument could have, because sometimes silence from someone you love feels like standing at the edge of a goodbye. But then you said something I will never forget. You said you never wanted to be the reasons someone suffered. You said you never wanted my mother to feel pain. You said you wished I'd trusted you enough to let you stand beside me. And in that moment everything changed, because I realized I had been protecting you from a burden that you were willing to carry with me. I had been deciding what you could handle without ever asking. And maybe that was the biggest lesson love had to teach me. Real love is not about finding someone who never creates difficult moments. Real love is finding someone who stays when difficult moments arrive. My mother eventually understood that too. She understood that the fear she felt was not because of you. It was because she loved me and wanted to protect me from a future she could not predict. She was afraid, because every parent carries a fear of seeing their child hurt. But she also saw something else. She saw that you were not taking me away from my family. You were helping me become more honest with them, and that changed the way I looked at everything. For so long, I believed love was about sacrifice. I believed loving someone meant constantly giving something up comfort, giving up certainty, giving up control. But I learned that mature love is different. Mature love is not about losing yourself for another person. It is about becoming more yourself because someone finally sees you clearly. And I want you to know something. If there was ever a moment when you believed you were a mistake in my life, I need you to let that thought go. You were never the mistake. The mistake was believing I could handle everything alone. The mistake was thinking that being strong meant never showing weakness. The mistake was forgetting that the person who loves you deserves to know your fears just as much as they know your dreams. Because a future is not built only during celebrations. A future is built in hospital rooms. It is built during difficult conversations. It is built when two people have every reason to walk away but choose to understand each other instead. And maybe that is what I wanted to tell you all along. Not that life will always be easy, not that love will never hurt, but that the right person makes you willing to face the hard moments instead of running from them. So if you are listening to me right now, I want to ask you something. Have you ever pushed someone away because you were afraid of losing them? Have you ever hidden your pain because you thought it would make you easier to love? Have you ever looked at someone and wished you had been brave enough to tell them the truth before it was almost too late? Because I have, and I almost lost something beautiful because I was afraid to be vulnerable. The truth I kept hidden was this. My mother's illness was never the end of our story. It was the moment that forced me to finally become honest about what you meant to me. It showed me that love is not measured by how perfectly we avoid pain. It is measured by how courageously we face it together. And today, when I look back at that hospital room, I do not only remember fear. I remember a turning point. I remember realizing that the people who truly belong in your life are not the ones who disappear when things become complicated. They are the ones who reach for your hand and say, "We will figure this out." That is what I wanted. Not perfection, not a flawless story, just someone who would stay. And if that someone is you, then I want you to know that I am no longer running from the future we could build. I am no longer hiding behind fear. I am no longer pretending that my heart does not have a voice, because it does, and it has been saying your name for longer than I was willing to admit.